Hi everyone, I'm Megan. I'm one of the artists here at Say It With Clay, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a really cute cupcake box that you can use for whatever trinkets or things that you might want. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about the kit that you guys got. I want to go through each of the materials and just give you a brief kind of explanation for what you're going to use them for, and then tell you anything else that you might need for today. So first of all, you are getting 2 pounds of clay. This is what we're going to be using to make our cupcake box. We're going to use pretty much all of it to make a really nice size box. So first we have our clay. Second thing we have is a sponge that we can use to smooth things or to get water on. We have a piece of a comb to scratch and attach if you've ever done clay before. If you haven't, I will be explaining this process later in this video. We have a piece of dental floss that we're going to use as a wire tool to cut our clay. We have a wooden pin tool that we're going to use for a bunch of different reasons. We have another little flossy guy that we're going to use for a couple different things. We have some paintbrushes that we'll use for glazes, and we'll also potentially use to apply slip. And we have a bunch of different glaze options for you. Okay? You'll have black and white and then 3 other colors. And we'll talk more about glazes in a little bit once you finish constructing our little box. I'll put those to the side. And we will get started with our construction. So if you've ever done clay before, you know that our very first step is to wedge our piece. Now think about where you are creating. You want to make sure that wherever you are, you're okay with it getting a little messy. Same with your hands and maybe your clothes. If it's clay, it's going to wash out of your clothes. It's just like dust, like basically dirt. The glaze does stain potentially if you get it on your clothes, so just be aware of that. And wherever you are, make sure you're okay with getting that messy as well. Oh, also you're gonna need some newspaper, potentially, and you're gonna need a meat tray or a paper plate or something to put your glaze colors on. So you'll need those a little later. All right, so now we're going to get started. I'm gonna take my clay out of my bag. And the first step that you have to do with any clay project is you have to wedge your clay. And that's kind of like kneading dough. So if you guys have done any bread making during this time, then you might be familiar with that. So we're going to knead our clay, and I'm going to do that when standing up, because for me it's easier from that angle. So I'm going to do it from the side so that you guys can see what I'm doing. So all you're going to do is you're going to push your clay down and pull it back towards you. And as I do that, that gets a little bit of a spiral as it wedges. Pushing it down, pulling it back. I can also change directions. And the reason why we are wedging is to make sure that there are no air bubbles in our clay. Air bubbles can become a problem when we put our clay project into the kiln, which is kind of like a giant oven. That heats up our clay and makes it more durable and finishes it off. If there are air bubbles in our project, it can explode in the kiln. So wedging it really fixes that problem. It smushes all the clay together and pops all the air bubbles. So we want to do this about 20 times, making sure that it's really all squished together. When we feel like we've done that enough, which I think I have, we are going to check and make sure that our clay has no air bubbles. So I'm going to take my dental floss, which we're using as a wire tool, and I'm going to pull it through the center of my blob of clay. And this is fun because you get to pull it through and open it up. Very satisfying, right? And I don't see any air bubbles. Air bubbles will show up as like little pockets in our clay. So this is actually good to go because now I have 1 pound here and 1 pound here of clay. So now we can get started on making our different parts, the bottom and the top of our cupcake box. So first thing we want to do is we want to take off some of our clay for any of the sprinkles or the top of our cupcake box. So I'm just going to take a little bit off there for that. Okay. And now we have to make both of these into spheres, so 3-dimensional circles. So I'm going to do that by first sort of hitting it on the table a little lightly to get rid of all my corners, okay, and make it somewhat sphere-ish before we roll it all together. I'm just lightly hitting the corners to do that. See how much more of a sphere that is than this one, right? So now I can start to roll it on the table or roll it between my hands. So since it's a pretty big piece of clay, it might be easier for you to roll on the table. But I'm not applying a ton of pressure because I don't want to smush this. I just want to roll it into more of the right shape. That's a pretty sphere shape that we have. So now that one's ready. So I'm going to make the second one into a sphere. So again, I'm going to hit it on its different sides to make it into more of a sphere shape. Get me started. A little more of a sphere. Now I'm going to roll it. All right. And now we have 2 spheres, so we're ready to get started on our cupcake. So I'm going to start with the bottom first, okay? So if you've ever made a pinch pot before, this is one of the first projects that a lot of people do with clay. We're going to start by pressing our thumb into our clay. And my nails are a little bit long right now, so I'm getting clay all underneath them. That might happen to you, just so you know. So I'm gonna press my thumb into the center. I don't want to go all the way through, so I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to where it is. I can always press it in more if I need to later, but I got started. So now we're going to start to expand this into a pot. So I'm going to be pinching and pulling the clay into the walls. So I'm going to put my thumb back into my clay, and I'm going to start to press outward and pull upward with my outside fingers. As I do that, it's going to start forming the shape. I can do this flat on the table and turn it as I go, or I can put it in my hand and turn it as I go that way. So it's up to you. See that? Oh, it's starting to form already. One thing you do want to be careful with is you want to make sure that your walls aren't getting too thin, because otherwise they might collapse. And we want them to be nice and stable and fairly even. So I think the thickest this should be is really like a 1/2 inch, and even that might be pushing it a little bit. But we definitely don't want it to be too much thinner than that either. That's the ideal thickness, I think. So as I make this go around, I'm pushing the clay from the bottom that's all extra down here into the walls. It's making the walls taller. And I can also pull it out as I go, making it a little wider. If you mess up and you make a patch of your walls too thin, What's great about clay is it's very forgiving. You could just smush it all back up into a ball, re-wedge it, and restart your pinch pop. And then you just get another opportunity to make it really cool. All right, so I think I'm pretty happy with how big it is. I'm gonna widen the top a little bit, so it's a little bit more like a cupcakey shape. All right, I'm gonna press the bottom down a little so the bottom's more flat. And I think I'm fairly happy with this shape. So now I'm going to put some newspaper in here. Crumple that up, put it into the middle. I'm actually gonna flip it over so that it's retaining its shape there and it's ready for us to decorate. So now I need to do a pretty similar thing to our top to make the top of our cupcake. So again, I'm going to put my thumb into the center of my ball of clay. To get started, make sure you don't go through the bottom. I'm going to start pulling it up and outward with my fingers, either by doing it on the table or in my hand. Making sure not to make it too thin. And there we have a basic shape. Now to make it a little bit more like the top of a cupcake and not as square as the bottom, I might press a little bit more at the top, especially if I had this on the table. We don't want it to be flat at the top. Press a little more at the top to make it a little bit more, I guess, triangular or rounded. And there we go. Same thing, I'm gonna crumple up some newspaper, put it underneath to give it some sort of stability as I decorate. You can actually also probably want to check, make sure this is going to fit. Good, it is. If it isn't, I could always make it wider. I'll always widen it a little bit to make sure it's going to work as the top of our cupcake. There we go. All right, so now we are ready to add our little extra bits to the top of our cupcake. So first of all, if you wanted to, make this look maybe a little bit more like some sort of frosting, you could take your finger and press it around here to make it like a spiral. Being careful not to like smush your entire thing, right? Completely up to you. You could also do this with your glaze later if you wanted. More of that spirally shape. And then we have to think about what kind of jimmies or sprinkles we want on here, and if we want to have a cherry on top or some other cupcake topper. So I'm going to make a bunch of sprinkles. So I'm going to do that by taking a little piece of clay off of my extra, and I'm going to roll it between my fingers, or I can roll it on my table to make a little snaky kind of shape. I can split that in half to make these smaller jimmies, or even smaller. But the smaller they get, the harder they're going to be to attach to the top of our cupcake. So I think this is a good size for me. I also could make different shaped sprinkles if I wanted to. You could keep it the same kind of sprinkle for the whole thing. You could mix it up. So maybe I want to have those flat circle ones, like the confetti ones. Make circles and flatten them when I attach them. Rolling them into a little ball. think I'm gonna make a slightly fancier sprinkle. I'm gonna try to make it kind of look sparkly. It was like sort of diamond star, guys. So I'm going to make a little ball. Right? Make it look like that. So I'll show you how I just did that. All I did was I made a ball of clay. I flattened it, and then I pinched each of the sides and flattened it again. Pinching and flattening until I had a shape I liked. So now I've got a good variety of sprinkles. I could add more if I wanted, if I feel like I need to once I start putting them on here. So the way that we're going to attach these is we are going to use slip, and we are going to use your piece of comb. So the way that you make slip is you are going to take a bit of your extra clay, and you're going to add it into a little container of water. So any little bowl of water that you have, you're going to put your clay in here, and you're going to squish it around in the water so that they get a little bit mixed up. You don't need that much water at all to get it to be nice and slimy, because that's what we want. Slip is essentially like your glue that's going to attach these pieces together. All right, so now it's pretty mixed up. And I'm going to, oh, I forgot to make a little cherry. Take a piece of clay, roll that into a ball. That'll be my cherry on top. So let's attach that first. So we're going to use our comb to scratch the spot where my cherry is gonna go a couple different times, different directions. And we're gonna do the same thing to the cherry itself. So anytime you attach two pieces of clay together, you need to scratch and attach and use slip. Otherwise, it's going to fall off. If I took this and I just stuck it right here, that's gonna fall off when it gets fired. So we don't want that to happen. We want them to actually stay together. So I'm gonna use my slip. I could use a brush if I wanted to. I'm just gonna use my fingers because I don't mind getting messy. I take a bit of slip and water, put it onto the score marks I made on my cherry, and also put it onto the top of my cupcake. Press my cherry on top, making sure not to squish this whole thing. That's why with the newspaper under there. And then it's attached. This kind of works like Velcro, as if these two, having all of the water go into the score marks, and then it's not going to be moving. So the last thing we have to do with that is we do have to kind of blend our edges together. We can try that with our finger, or you could try any of your other tools that we have. So I've got my pin tool, try to use that to blend the edge. I could use my brush, or I could use my other little floss here. I think I like doing this part with this part of my floss tool. See how much more blended that is. Now I'm ready to start attaching some of my sprinkles. So the same rules apply. You do still have to scratch wherever you want your sprinkle, and scratch your sprinkle. Add some watery slip to both parts. Attach, gently squish that onto there, and then smooth it out. Connect the two pieces. You can do the same with any of the other types of sprinkles. circle ones. Still have the scratch. Add my slip. And a touch. We'll flatten that out a little bit more. We gotta blend. And my last tip is sprinkle. And then if you want to smooth anything, you could use your finger with a little tiny bit of water, or you could use your sponge, a little tiny bit of water. I wouldn't put a ton because otherwise it makes the clay slimy, because the clay already has a lot of water in it. If you add a bunch more, the clay can't absorb any more water, and then it just sits on top and makes it slimy and gross. And then you have to wait longer for it to dry. I would use just a teensy tiny bit of water if you want to smooth. So once you attach all your sprinkles to the top of your cupcake, then the top of your cupcake's done, and we're ready to decorate the bottom. So the bottom we don't need to attach anything to, which is nice, so I can move these tools to the side. But we do have to think about how to make the lines for like the cupcake wrapper. So we could use any of these tools or any tools you find around your house to do that. So I'm gonna test them out on my extra piece of clay to see which one I like. I'm gonna flatten my extra piece of clay out. Okay, and I'm gonna drag each of these across to see what kind of lines it makes. All right, so that makes kind of rounded, deeper lines. My pin tool makes thinner, deeper lines. And my floss tool makes thin, pretty shallow lines. So I think I'm gonna use my pin tool to make my lines on my cupcake liner. All I'm gonna do, I'm gonna drag it from the top to the bottom, or the bottom to the top. And make those lines. And you're gonna get less of those little crumblies of clay if you use the drag the whole width or length of the tool rather than using just the tip and drawing, because then you're kind of compressing the clay rather than carving it up out of it. So I'll show you what that looks like. If I go like this, see how much more ragged the edges are? So it helps if we kind of press it along the whole thing and drag it rather than use the points. If you do get a lot of those little clay crumblies, you can let it dry a little more, and then you can use a brush to brush them away. If you did one of these and you didn't like it, you can get a little bit of water and smush the clay back to flat. Draw a new one. Until we fill our whole cupcake liner. All right, so now you can imagine what this is gonna look like when it's all done. So now that we're done the constructing part, I think we're ready to start glazing. So I wanna explain glaze real quick. So first of all, glazes are how we get our color onto our clay. You will have a white, a black, and 3 different colors in your kit. What's great about these is we can mix them to make new colors on our tray or our paper plate. But they do act a little differently than regular paint because they're made to withstand really hot temperatures in our kiln. So these are actually gonna turn a little brighter or a little darker than the color they currently are when they're wet. And then we will be adding a clear glaze on top so that they get shiny when they go through the kiln, okay? So I'm going to pick a color. Maybe I want to do a yellow on my cupcake line. And I want to do a, how about, I'm gonna make white icing, okay? So I think I like this, the white as is, because this is gonna be pure white, but I wanna mix a little bit of orange into my yellow. So I'm gonna pour some of my yellow onto my plate, just like that. I can always pour more later. Pour a little bit of orange. Maybe I have to scoop a little orange because it's thicker than the yellow. Onto my plate, pour my palette. And then I can mix the two. And they mix like paint, but again, just keep in mind it's gonna be a little darker or a little brighter than the color it is on my palette right now. Okay. So now I can start to paint this on here. Again, make sure that whatever you're painting, you are okay with it getting messy. You could even use a piece of newspaper underneath it to protect your table space. Okay. Now I can start painting. I could leave my clay a little bit longer if I want it to dry a bit before I start painting. That's fine. I'm gonna try to make it nice and even. And we are gonna have to go back and do several coats of this for our glaze to be really nice and solid. So I would say at least 2 coats. If you have enough, you could make 3. And a little glaze goes a long way. So the first coats that you're putting on, you're gonna see sort of grayish through it because of thin coat of glaze. But once this dries completely, and it'll look kind of like dusty when it dries, then you'll be able to add another coat and it'll be so much more solid. Okay, so I'd paint my whole thing, let it dry completely, and then come back to it and do our second coat. Same thing for the top of our cupcake. I can use my white to paint onto my my frosting, or I can use whatever other color. If I wanted to do some like shading, maybe I want to do some blue on my spiral that I made, or I want to paint that there. I'll show you how we can do that. I can rinse out my, might want to have a fresh thing of water if you're changing colors a lot. Rinse out my brush. I'm going to put some white on here, and again, you're going to really see through it right now. You'll be able to do a second coat later. So if you wanted to do any shading or anything like that, maybe I'd do a coat or 2 of the white solid and then add the shading last. So this is all nice and solid and dry. I can take some blue, mix it with a little white, and I can put a bit of a shadow in here where I want my swirl to be. Completely up to you how you do this. It's your cupcake. And then I can paint my individual sprinkles, whatever color I want. Maybe I want them to be yellow. Again, do a couple coats. And I paint the edges of it too. Okay. And you can also paint the inside. But you'd have to wait for it to dry completely before you can take your newspaper out and then paint that. If you don't paint something, it will be either red or white depending on your clay, and it'll just be shiny because we'll put our clear glaze on top of it, okay? And then that's it. If you want, I would probably put your initials on the bottom so we know whose is whose. So if you carve your initials lightly so you don't poke through all the way. That would be good so that we can make sure we know who did which cupcake so we can get it back to you. All right. Have fun with your creations, and thank you for being with me today.